or if this is your first time joining in the File live stream, we're excited to have you here. Just so everyone knows, the goal of these is to have events to showcase our customers and to tell their stories. And I'm really excited about today's and to highlight how researchers at Braze and Brex use tools like Figma in their work. I'm also really excited to introduce you to Krista, who is on our research team over at Figma. She's actually going to be leading today's conversation with our awesome panelists. And with that, I want to turn it over to her. I'll be in the Q&A in the chat just to kind of monitor and keep track of questions throughout. But yeah, Krista, I'd love to turn it over to you now.
Awesome, thanks Joey. Hi everyone, my name is Krista and I'm a researcher here at Figma, like Joey mentioned. I've actually only been at Figma for about 5 months. And my fun fact is that I love to share is that I was able to be in our office for 4 glorious days before we were all sheltered in place. So I've had the opportunity of trying to get as creative as possible to scale and evangelize our research while being new and newly remote. So this topic is really near and dear to me on so many levels. And at Figma, I work closely with our collaboration. So we're thinking of ways to make it easier for non-designers to use Figma, and then on our community as well as our design systems teams. But enough about me, I swear I'll stop talking about myself. We have some really, really awesome customers that I'm super excited to chat with today. We're going to start by talking about what it means to scale your research and learn some pro tips from them on effective processes that they've set up. We'll then have Braze show a deck, which will demonstrate their workflow, and then we'll open up to some questions from all of you. So first, though, I'd like to kick things off by having each of our guests do a little intro. So who you are, what your role is, what your company is, and really what your company does at sort of the highest level. So we'll start with Yuna. Yeah.
Hi, I'm a product designer at Braze. I will be celebrating my 1 year at Braze next month.
Wonderful. And then we have Chino, who's also joining her at Braze.
Hey, yep, also at Braze, customer engagement platform. I've been at Braze for about 2 years, helping to scale out the design and research practice.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Nicholas.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Nikki from Brex. Brex is a business-to-business financial services company with the mission of reimagining financial systems to help every growing company reach their full potential. And I am the research manager, was a research team of 1 for a long time. I'm really excited to chat with you, and thanks so much to the Figma team for setting this up.
Awesome, thanks all of you for being here. I love that we have a mix of research and product designers. I think that's like the epitome of scaling and combining our forces of research. So really excited to chat with you all and to also learn from you guys. So I'd first like to start with you, Nicholas, and learn more about your responsibilities as a researcher at Brex. I know you mentioned you were the sole researcher for a long time, and I've been there as well. And I know that's a large undertaking, but you also learn a lot more about how to scale your practice. So yeah, I'm curious to learn more about your responsibilities at Brex.
For sure, thank you. So I was a relatively early employee of the company, not a titled researcher at the start, but have been sort of a researcher my whole life. I'm a curious person, curious about people. So I really just started presenting everything we were learning from our customers in research, sort of more formalized research format. And that quickly led to like a more official titled position. And now we have a team of 3 at Brex.
Oh, wow,
1 research operations person, and then 2 researchers, myself and my colleague Ankita. And our mandate is fairly broad right now. So the researchers primarily focus on foundational work.
Okay.
So very early on, I mean, Brex is very much a startup. We have about 500 employees, but we're only about 2 years out from public launch. So we're really still very focused on foundationally understanding our customer base and foundationally understanding some of the processes they're going through. Things like, how do you choose a credit card? How do you choose your bank account when you first start your business? Who are small business owners in America? Who are financial accountants and controllers in America? So really understanding some of these basic concepts, that's the work that we primarily focus on ourselves.
Awesome.
But a big part we play is also enablement through tools for our design and product teams.
That's awesome. And kind of, just taking a step back, I think one of the beautiful things I love about being in our field of research is we all kind of come from different backgrounds and tend to come from like product support or just different avenues. So I'm curious how like your research team fits in. I know you mentioned you focus on more foundational, so kind of like more of the meatier high level type of research, but how does the research team fit into your organization and kind of how you work with other types of teams at your company?
Yeah, so we report into the head of design.
Okay.
So we sit on the design team. Our weekly meetings are with all of our design colleagues, product and brand design. And of course, we work very closely with our product management org, but we also work very closely with our marketing org. And because we've had the privilege of sort of building the team from scratch as the company scaled, we really lean into supporting everyone at the company. We really have the perspective that research shouldn't be only serving product and design, as I think it often does in the tech industry today.
Yeah.
And really, lots of big decisions are being made. And I view my job as helping people make better decisions. So we've done research with our people team to better understand Brex's internal culture and build a better culture and help our hiring brand, help people understand that it's a great place to work. We've worked with our executives on some of their priorities to understand, make decisions. Probably can't go into too much detail there, but yeah, a lot of teams have decisions to make, and we really focus on helping them, whatever the method or approach may be.
Totally. Yeah, and I guess like kind of to that, I know we're here to talk about how to do research at scale, and I've learned over time in this field that if you look at work as kind of like one project at a time, you end up being more of a service like you were talking about. And so you're providing really helpful support at the more granular level, but it becomes harder to be part of the production of something like new and potentially something more creative and a new direction for the company at whole. And so when you think about Brex and the complexities of your product and doing what you do, what are some of the considerations of going into more of the scaling part of your research? You mentioned like you're also helping like the people ops team. So how do you answer all of these bigger questions while also helping the team do their own research?
Yeah, that's definitely the stage we're in right now. As our team has grown and as the company has grown, the need has really increased, right? I think we've chatted about it a little bit in the lead up to this conversation, but democratization of research is definitely a buzzword in the industry right now. Yeah. And we are really excited about it and embracing it because we work with lots of smart and interesting people.
Yeah.
And there was a time where I was not a formal researcher, and I was very confident that I could still do research. And I'm very confident in my colleagues' abilities and curiosity and inquiry to learn from our customers. So a lot of what we're doing right now and over the last 6 months or so is really building out these processes to make it easier and enable our partners and colleagues to learn, whatever that may mean. So for example, and we'll get into this, I think, a little bit more, we've really tried to streamline and get as close to self-serving usability testing for our design team using Figma and other remote tools. And the same goes for helping others talk to customers. We've done less sort of methodological democratization, but just helping people talk to customers when their decisions need that input. We're sort of the experts at how to do that. So we write guides, we have like an informative wiki, we write overviews, and we really try to create these tool sets so that we're never a blocker to learning.
I love that. Yeah. And like anything I can do to make sure that the teams I'm working with have access to customers is sort of like the core of who I am as a researcher. So I never want to be the blocker of that. So setting up those processes like you're mentioning, like a wiki page and things like that are super critical. And that actually really goes in nicely, thank you, Nicholas, to like how Figma comes into the picture. So I'd love to kind of turn it over to Yuna and learn more about how Figma came in to your role, obviously as a designer, but then how you think about it in terms of doing research.
Yeah, so the Figma first came in, I've always been a big fan. When we transitioned into Figma at Braze, a couple of things that was really no-brainer for us to decide. One was the ability to, it's like power of source of truth and ability to, design, prototype, and test all within that one tool, and then share that prototype with your customers and internal stakeholders, and that as well as like the functionality of live comments, as well as like updates, iterating on the feedback on the spot. So that those are a couple of things, and in terms of the way we think about research, there's a lot of it definitely helped us quickly iterate on our prototypes, like as soon as the feedback comes in, and we are able to address that right away. And then being able to like collaborate that within the team, and that's really helpful, and ability to definitely speed up our process of running that research.
Yeah, the iterative ability in Figma's prototyping is also one of my favorite things as a researcher. I've worked with designers where we'll see different things. We'll be getting like an overview of how a customer works, and we'll change some of our own prototype to match like how they, naming that they use their own name in the prototype. And the fact that that can happen within seconds and it's changing the prototype is just a game changer to make it feel like the customer's living in their own space without it being fully built, without having to use engineering work. So that's one of my favorite features as a researcher. I'm curious, Chino, if you have some favorite Figma features that you've used for research.
Yeah, I think that sums it up, the way that you and Yuna talked about it. I mean, the fact that it's not precious, like the prototypes that you're putting out into the world and you're getting feedback on, that, mistakes aren't the end of the world. You can change it and it updates. And I think that's something that that's invaluable in just collecting feedback and iterating on things.
Totally. Any favorites from you, Nicholas?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely had some fun. I mean, we've been a pretty scrappy team for a while, getting bigger now. So that's changing our practice a little bit, but we've definitely done a couple studies where we really changed stuff like in real time, testing out new website content. And I think that the most exciting part is the ability for designers to do testing together. Yeah. And like Yuna mentioned, taking notes in product, and like in product as in Figma, is actually like it's a small nuance, but it's a big change because it makes the turnaround time of updating and understanding what happened in a session much faster. Mm-hmm. And the co-design ability, which is a bit separate from research, someone can run a usability session, take notes in Figma, and someone else can immediately get to work once that sort of set of sessions that day is wrapped up.
Totally. That kind of like goes into how I've been thinking about, I'm a new researcher at Figma for the most part, I guess. And, living in this COVID world, it's really changed and made me think critically about like how I evangelize my research. I'm one who I love making my research feel very physical. And I would have foam boards all around the room with our customers' pictures and quotes, and so that anybody walking by could see it. And so I've tried different methods in Figma of like evangelizing what we're hearing and how we're taking notes, and creating like, kind of Figma foam boards in a way. So I'm curious from you all how you've thought and maybe potentially used Figma differently now that we're pretty much all remote. Yuna or Chino?
Yeah, so one thing that, being remote is that we won't be able to do things like ad hoc sync on like design flows and walkthroughs. So one thing in terms of collaboration, Figma has really done a good job around helping designers bridge the gap for engineers, handoff process. And some of the things that we've been doing is like sort of structuring the Figma pages better and organizing it. So across the board within our design organization, everyone's sort of doing that in their own way. And in my case, I'm added like the menu, like tablable contents, and it's broken down into interaction, edge cases, and specifications. So engineers and PMs can go through it and sort of self-navigate and being able to understand the workflows and interactions better. So I think that I often think about the sort of design and engineering collaboration, and that's one of the most powerful things that that allowed us to speed up that process.
The naming pages is very top of mind for me as I think about, you know, collaborative workflows into Figma. And that is such a great pro tip. I've seen customers put like, you know, developers look here with emojis and different ways of communicating, like getting them to focus into the right space. I love that so much. How about you, Tino?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually just bringing up links, I love the new feature of like being able to link directly to the prototype versus like the artboard and things like that. But touching back on like what Nikki was talking about, as far as like evangelizing UX research in general, like making things available, like compared to like non-cloud solutions, what we've been able to do is like we use Confluence for most of our documents for the company, and just being able to just straight up embed Figma files into certain pages, just to you know, if they're works in progress, like if we're ironing out what something is supposed to be or our process for something, and we're doing that in Figma, we just put that straight into Confluence, and that's been a nice feature that we've been taking advantage of lately, for sure.
That's awesome. Okay, let's check time. Okay, so kind of my last question before we get into the Braze workflow and how you all think about scaling, and we get to see more of like a demo in that sense. I'm curious from all of you for your tips and tricks for people just starting out and trying to build their own research practice, or as a designer doing their own researcher, what's kind of like your first step that you would recommend that they take? Nikki, you're smiling, so hey.
Yeah, for sure. So I just want to make sure I clarify the question, like people who are looking to start working in these fields for the first time?
Either that, or just like, you know, they're a product designer and there isn't a research function at their company, but they need to test their designs. Like, what are some pro tips?
So I think there's a lot. That's like another webinar, but I think that there's a few things. One is I definitely talk to a lot of people who are interested in doing research, whether that means becoming a titled researcher and like working in the field, or like you said, like you're working another role, but you want to learn how to talk to customers or feel like you're getting more value out of talking to customers. For the people who are trying to break in, my advice is really always the same. It's do some research, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Talk to 5 customers and just write down what they said. You don't even have to necessarily have a goal, but in order to like get a research job, you have to show that you can and have done some research. So just do it. It doesn't really matter what it is. Just like dip your feet in yourself and feel it out.
Yeah.
And then for the other question, a little bit more tactically, starting to do research, especially early on at an org, if you haven't necessarily invested in a professional research function, it really is making the time, I find. Just make the time. Like your customers are very likely to want to talk to you, especially if you're a designer or a product leader, because they're already using whatever you've built and they want it to be better. Or they want to tell you all the problems they have with it because they want it to be better. So I think the main tips are make the time to do it instead of just like saying we need to talk to more users, just like do it tomorrow. And then I think the tactical tip is ask them what they don't like a lot more than what they want. People are much more comfortable or much more able to accurately tell you what their problems are than accurately tell you what they want you to build, because people don't really know. They might have interesting ideas, and it's always good to have those conversations too, but we find that we get a lot more out of it if I say, you know, what's the worst part of using our product, or what's the worst part of your week? What do you look at on your calendar and you say, oh gosh, I don't want to do that? What button, like what do you get to when you're in Figma and say, wow, I really don't like using this tool?
Totally. Yeah, just get in and get your feet wet is a great approach. Chino, and then we can hand it over to you guys officially.
Yeah, I would definitely echo the sentiment of talking with customers. That's the biggest hurdle, is like just actually doing it. It doesn't matter if your script is perfect or,
Right.
you know, you have the perfect lines to figure out. Just like crossing that hurdle of actually talking with customers is definitely the first chasm. I think the other piece of it is, you know, the fact that research lives and dies on how it's bought in the organization, and just inviting others that aren't necessarily your go-to people to the research that you're conducting. Again, imperfect research as it may be, just involving others, engineers, marketing folks, business intelligence, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point of like, the more people you can have like joining in on the customer call, the better, because then you're all hearing the same things, and it makes everything after that so much faster, and you're able to scale so much quicker, because if an engineer is in there, they're already thinking around how they could get creative on solutions. And yes, so much. The more the merrier is always how I work.
Yeah, that shared context is invaluable.
Yeah.
I mean, Figma's definitely helped with that, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, I would love now to turn it over to you all, Chino and Nina, and have you go through your presentation for us.
Sure. Let me go into presenter mode here. Okay. Yeah, so today we wanted to sort of share how we are running usability testing.
Will you click on present so we can see it a little bigger?
Okay.
That's okay.
There you go.
Wonderful, thank you.
Right, okay, great. Yeah, so today we want to share how at Braze we were running usability testing, and as our team grows and we want to have more research velocity and how to tackle that. So I want to hone in on the particularly the remote usability testing in the context of today's environment, as well as being able to scale that team. So just like any other research steps, there's a variety of test ways you can test your design, and whatever you are doing, whether you're doing moderated in person to a moderated remote format, we always make sure that that it's the right method for us and for the type of project that we are working on. And for us, the remote and moderated usability testing has really worked well for projects that have a lot of hypotheses around usability and functionality, and it doesn't have a lot of flexibility or has certain limitation around scope, design, or tech, and can also benefit from quantitative insights such as Heatmap and success metrics, and that I'd like to show you the examples later on. And in terms of if you have already sort of one-on-one usability testing scheduled, there are ways that you can sort of scale that as well, and from our experience, like time and resources sometimes can be a constraint, or limited access to customers that we can talk to. In those ways, we've seen success running discovery and user testing hybrid sessions, where we will spend like 20 minutes talking to the customers and understanding their pain points, and spending the rest of the time going through that preliminary designs and getting their feedback on it. And iterating quicker and more frequently, as some of the discussion we had earlier around Figma, and just making those changes and updates as that they come in live allows us to really like polish and the experience and get the maximum value out of the conversation we are having with our customers. And there are 5 steps that we normally go through running usability testing at Braze. First, we list hypotheses and questions around the design and the problem area, and set up and launch prototypes, or sometimes do an in-person or schedule call with customers, and analyze the test results, and we'll normally sometimes follow up with the customers and sort of further validate your hypotheses and questions that you may have. And at the end, we'll sync with the product and engineering to discuss adjustment priorities. And in terms of listing hypotheses, I wanted to show you an example of one of the projects that we recently tested at scale. And this was for our multimedia messaging service design, which is basically SMS with ability to send out audio files, videos, photos, and so on. And so for that, we had three sort of overarching hypotheses and questions around our design. That one was the adoption and understanding workflow. Like if we changed the layout of certain things on the page, would that encourage people to adopt that feature more? And secondly, like around the usability, like discoverability of buttons, where they are clicking on it, how they're interacting with each components in a granular level. And thirdly, the visual communication part, where we wanted to, the way we wanted to communicate certain information to users in a different way from prototype to prototype. And when we launched the prototype, we actually used a tool called Maze. Maze is a usability testing platform. You can run unmoderated and moderated usability testing. The reason why we chose this tool was because we wanted, obviously, seamless integration with Figma and get both quantitative and qualitative feedback in one place. We also wanted a control over recruiting process and who we talk to, as we wanted to leverage our own community of users. And as an added bonus, it allowed our users to go through the prototypes at their convenience without us having to schedule a call or interviews. And for the one really great thing about this tool was that it gave us an ability to create like a follow-up surveys at the end of each prototypes. So here's some of the sort of questions that we asked in the survey, collecting satisfaction scores to quantify the data further, grasping context so we can sort of skew certain factors in as we are analyzing the results. Also comparing test A and B and getting their feedback and preferences, and also additional insights that was really helpful for us to understand what are the potential sort of feature or product expansion that we can look into in the future. And we ended up talking to a couple of users at the end of the iteration to even further sort of validate our questions and hypotheses. And we have a community called Braze Bonfire, which is a tight-knit community of our Braze customers and growth marketers and product teams to sort of collaborate and help each other succeed. And so we leverage that community to advertise and recruit customers to test for. And so as soon as we started to get results, we started to look at the qualitative data and collected those feedback and to just sort of gauge interest and understanding of how they're interacting with the prototypes. And but one thing that we really wanted to hone in on was the quantitative data. So when we were looking at the sort of analytics and hypotheses that we had, we wanted to focus on the macro level analytics, like what and where users are clicking on, how were they navigating different components within the UI, and also in identifying friction, as opposed to looking at the macro level analytics of, like, success metrics or completion rate. So just to give you an example of like the type of data that we gathered. So this was like a drop-down that we tested. We obviously wanted users to click on the MMS drop-down options. And as you can see in prototype B, there's a little bit left in the completion rate. But again, that gave us enough information to understand like okay, there are more we can do in terms of design improvements. So we made a minor change in like visual and how you communicate those options differently. And that was like one of the examples that we encountered during the test. So the benefits of running remote usability tests, definitely the speed and the velocity. So for our case, we are actually able to do the end-to-end sort of launch to synthesizing the results within a week, which is like normally like around 3 times faster than how we normally run usability testing in a traditional format. And then ability to analyze the results as they come in definitely saved us a lot of time as well. And then the data you get from unmoderated usability testing was really helpful because the users are going through interacting with your product as they would in their natural environment, unguided. So it helps us to validate our hypothesis through observing those. And analysis and synthesis was another big point where we were able to collect the results all in one place and get through the synthesis more efficiently, as opposed to sometimes we go back to the recordings and digitalizing that information can take some time. So that said, there are certain things to consider when we were running usability testing. For example, for more complex workflows, if you're testing a project that involves a lot of different interactions and more robust workflows, then moderate format may work better, and which has worked better for us as well. And for small teams, such as like at Braze, a lot of our designers are also running research as well as the design itself. So for us, working in some design conversations during the discovery have proven to save a lot of time, such as like, as I mentioned earlier, the preliminary design walkthroughs, and some of our teams have seen success doing participatory design exercise during the discovery phase. So there is a lot of things that we can be creative around running usability testing in different format. Yeah, just as an end note, like at Braze, design process and tooling are key components to increasing research velocity, and we're growing a team, so that's something we are continuously discussing and looking at. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ina and Chino. That was amazing and spurred so many amazing questions in our chat. So thank you all for asking your questions. We're going to kind of dive into those, and there were a lot of questions specifically around like how you were using Maze to build some of that like heat mapping and with the prototype. Yeah, I think I'm curious to learn more about that kind of connection with Figma.
Yeah, so the Maze, setting up the Maze prototype was really easy. You just literally copy and paste your Figma prototype, and then it just loads into it. And you can create surveys to collect qualitative data as well as quantitative data. And as soon as the moment you launch it, you're able to both start collecting and then seeing the results, whether through a heat map or the survey answers.
And just for anyone new out there that might not know kind of like when the best time is, or what the best type of research is to utilize something like a heat map, what's kind of your reasoning for or benefit for having a heat map in your testing?
Yeah, definitely for around like components testing, or even like a small usability types of things, like for example, like button sizes or button placements or drop-down options like you've seen in the example. That allows us to really see where exactly users are clicking, are they even interacting with it, and that gives us sort of idea of how we can improve the visuals.
Yeah, one way I've really leaned heavily on having that heat map is real micro interactions, like you were kind of saying, of like if they're going to click just a centimeter or pixel over versus, you know, to the left, like that's critical for where we put click targets. So that's a great use for that. Another question is, how do you document your testing insights? Like what processes and tools, I think especially now as we're all remote, how are you sort of like synthesizing and sharing that information?
Yeah, so I think around in our team, like a lot of designers use different tools to synthesize, like whether it be a Google documentations to analyze, like create rainbow charts and priority lists. So we create those. In my case, with this testing in particular, I use the Google Docs and Confluence to sort of list down what are the features that users asked about, or what are the biggest frictions were, and then sort of prioritizing that based on the quantitative data.
Nikki, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I was listening so intently. Can you just repeat the question?
So how are you synthesizing your data?
Yeah.
And what tooling do you use?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is definitely similarly to Una. We are a G Suite organization, so we do a lot of synthesis in Google Docs and Sheets. We also use a product called Coda. This is something that's relatively new at Brex, but has taken off a little bit. So I think at least for the research team, and what we encourage our designers to do is sort of do the deeper analysis in Docs, just because that's what the company's most comfortable using. And then we're putting sort of the primary takeaways in other places, right? We're putting them in Slack. We use a product called Threads, which is another, we don't really have an equivalency to Confluence right now, but Threads is sort of like a message board for announcements that we use. So it's often linking back to a Google Doc at the end of the day, but we're really trying to get those key takeaways in front of as many eyes as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's all about like what is most comfortable for you to make sure you're getting the right insights out. And so as I mentioned, I kind of set up like a fake foam board in Figma. And so when I'm conducting the research, the entire team is listening in, and they're taking like Post-it notes in a file. And then it makes it 10 times easier for all of us to kind of like move those around and start to theme. The other tool that I've been really into that my manager, Kristen Torrey here at Figma, introduced us to is Dovetail. And it's really nice to be able to connect like the other researchers at Figma, what they're hearing and different tagging that they use with the tagging I use, and making sure we're connecting the dots across all of our research. So those have been kind of like my favorite go-tos recently. Awesome. We had also some questions around like participants and paneling. And so let me make sure I'm reading the question right. Yeah, so how do you kind of think about recruiting users? I'm curious to learn from all of you, kind of double clicking on recruiting for usability testing, but how you're thinking about it in terms of, yeah, usability testing, I guess, and how you get sort of that panel that you mentioned, Una, in your Slack.
Yeah, sure. So actually, this was an initiative done by our marketing team, and they put together and sort of like a community Slack channel that users can voluntarily sign up, and then they're continuously having like discussions around like, you know, best practices marketing, and sometimes product team will go in and ask questions or like share screenshots of their prototypes and then have them vote at it. So there are so many different ways that product team are leveraging that. And so we've taken initiative of, you know, leveraging this community to recruit users. We've also done like traditionally, like looking into customer size, like team size and personas and so on to recruit users as well.
Yeah, I can chime in on that as well. Yeah, Brex is in an interesting spot with recruitment because our target customer is pretty specific. It's changing a bit now, but for a long time it was, you know, enterprise finance team leadership, and also e-commerce company leadership. Those are sort of our two primary bases, and those are very difficult communities to source through traditional panel offerings. So we have used panels. We like a tool called User Interviews and also Respondent. I've seen that mentioned in the chat. We've used other third parties as well, mostly for like large market surveys. A company called YouGov. They're better known for their political polling, but they are a really, really great partner and resource. But a lot of our recruiting is done from within our own user base, or it's just been difficult to like find, VP of finance through a traditional panel, which are sort of more oriented towards consumer research. Really, really great for consumer research. I worked at Square prior to Brex, and we were easily able to recruit lots of people to talk to for more consumer oriented research. But right now I'm doing a project, newly incorporated companies, right? You just started or you're just about to start. And wow, where are those folks? And I find myself like on Reddit, made a Reddit account, and people are posting questions about, hey, what's the best way for me to incorporate? And I'm like messaging them. So sometimes you got to get down in there in the weeds with your users. And you actually learn a ton by doing that on LinkedIn or Reddit or other message boards, because you see what they're actually asking and saying. And then you're able to connect with them where they already are. So it feels more organic.
Totally. Yeah, recruiting, I think, is one of those things in our field of it's one of, I think, the hardest things that we do, and it's the most important to get it right in a way. I think if you don't have like the means in terms of funding, right, to get super creative with like buying user testing, one thing that I try and do is, what are some ways that you're already getting customer data and how can you utilize that for research? So if you have an NPS question, like asking if they're, having an option that they can opt into research and that you can reach out to them, when you run bigger customer-wide surveys, like always, having some research layer in there of questions that you have, and again, having like an opt-in for follow-up is kind of like a good starter pack, if you will.
I just want to chime in really quickly again, like the fact that Braze's marketing team has really invested in building that community is like a huge, huge benefit.
Totally.
It's something that Brex has talked about, but it's something, I won't say we're behind on it because we're so new, but it's a huge if you can start that early, and not just for the research team. I mean, just having a place for your community to be together. Figma has like a thriving Slack community. If you want people to be, the more they think about your product, the better your company is probably going to do if it's for the right reasons. And a community often has people really thinking about it in positive ways and evangelizing it and excited to participate.
Definitely. Yep. And kind of again, another question around like how we recruit, but then also like when we're on the call with customers, how do you balance not overwhelming the customer or non-customer and getting more of your teammates on the call? So like this fear of being watched, I have like a whole thing that I say, but I'm curious from all of you how you kind of handle that. Chino?
So on the side of inviting others to the research, I think that, all of our recordings are available to everyone in the company. I think that's been helpful, so people can accidentally stumble across the research that you're conducting, as well as sales calls and things like that. So I think that's been helpful. We've always tried to make it kind of an open door policy as far as like our customer interviews. We have, a public calendar that's available to anyone in the company. We have a Slack channel that kind of alerts anybody that is feeling like that, having that kind of noise throughout the day, that a research interview is about to start, and they can join in anonymously if they choose to. Not many people take us up on that offer as much as we'd like, but it is available to everyone in the company. So that's one method that we've been using.
How about you, Yina?
Yeah, and also preparation around like scripting. So working with the researcher as well as like PMs to help craft that conversation better. I think practice makes things better, I think.
Yeah, I think the whole, like I do a lot of prep work before any research kicks off to make sure like everyone knows how to ask questions, everyone knows our goals. But I think I would have sometimes, I was at Asana previously and we would have an entire room of like 15 people, but you couldn't see all 15. And I would for sure share that there were other people in the room, so there might be questions from them. But now that we're all on Zoom, I have to limit. And so that's been really hard for me. But having the Zoom recordings and making sure there's like a cadence of sharing those out to the entire product org is sort of been my hack around that. But yeah, I think though, like having like a Slack space or something to like share what you're hearing in the session for everyone else to also. And I do like a sign up sheet basically to make sure everyone tries to get in at least 2 sessions on the call is kind of my pro tip there. Okay, and then let's see. How do you make sure your research team gathers deeper insights from research and not just like surface level or superficial findings? Question from the audience there.
Yeah, I'm interested. Are we moving into like the live Q&A part now? Because I'm interested, like, what is a superficial finding versus a deeper finding? I think that I'm not sure there's really a distinction often. I don't know, do we want to let that person unmute and have a little back and forth?
I can kind of like play that role, I guess. So
Sure.
I think it's like an example I've seen and when I was starting out too is, you know, when customers tell you, well, I want this, like I'm trying to think of something in Figma without, but you know, I want to be able to do X. And oftentimes it's not that they want that specific feature. It's better to understand what it is that they're trying to do that's like blocking them to have that. And so there might be a better fix deeper down, you know, if you double click into their pain. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about like superficial versus
Great.
Taking
yeah, that makes sense.
Customers' requests for face value.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. I mean, I think that's where the trained research expertise like comes into play, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think in the research community, there's a lot of concern, and I saw a message earlier saying, you know, is bad research better than no research? And this is sort of a version of that, where, you know, people who are less familiar with doing user research might hear someone say, you know, 3 users say, oh, I want this thing. And they're like, all right, we got to build that thing. And that's an example where I wouldn't say that's bad research, but you're probably missing the bigger picture. And this is where the concept of jobs to be done is really healthy. This is like I don't know whether they're even called business philosophy from Clayton Christensen. And it's like, you know, what is the customer hiring your product to do? And I'm a big fan of this model because when they're asking for something, you know, that's the question you ask. But what are they hiring us to do? Why do they want that? What's the job they're trying to do with your product? And that's an exercise that we do a lot. I saw another question in the chat about, you know, the sort of design exercises that a team might do. And we do a lot of jobs to be done drafting. Like what are people trying to hire us to do? And when they're saying they want something, you know, that's when you have to push them past, okay, well, why do you want that? You know, and that's what, getting back to what I was saying earlier, you know, what's the problem they're having? Get them to tell you the problem that underlies the request. Because I think, and maybe Yuna can speak more to this, like it's much easier for designers to design to a problem because product designers are very innovative people with created this, you know, highly technical creative skill. So give them the problem. Like my job is to bring the problem forward and then sort of let the designers, you know, put their genius to work.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I think just making sure you're asking the why, and why is kind of like a high level approach to that. Yuna, a question around how much detail do you recommend, or kind of, you know, how you think about how much detail you should have in your prototypes when testing?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So we really work around the hypothesis and really try to provide details on the parts that we really want to test at. So I try to make it as, depending on the time, if the time allows, as close to sort of the ideal state or the test that we want to do. And tester, but we've definitely done testing with like a sort of work in progress prototypes, because you can always get feedback, and sometimes ambiguity around certain design details can actually like create more conversation between us and the users. So depending on like sort of the questions and hypotheses we have, that's how we try to sort of structure and design and bring the design forward.
Yeah, I think it's all about like, you know, coming back to what are your actual research questions? Like, what are you hoping to learn? Really kind of gets down to the fidelity you need in the design or the prototype. Yeah, I kind of live by the double diamond of approaching that. So if I think we're getting close to launching and we really need to make sure like this has a nice bow on it, is ready to go, it's definitely going to be a more built out prototype. But versus like, I love having like empty spots in a prototype just to sort of spark those questions from a customer and what does this make them want to do, and kind of getting them to think out loud in that space of ambiguity.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And then any tips on how to optimize user testing for multiple testers for a single Figma file? Oh, this is a good one. Do you guys have any thoughts or experiences? So basically, if you have like 10 different customers you're going to be talking to in the day, that would be wild. And you have like one Figma file, how do you kind of like approach that? Do you create multiple Figma files for testing, kind of the ins and outs for that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I kind of use, I don't know if this answers the question directly, but I try to do like sort of, if it's not happening at the same time, and that's often the case, then just sort of control the permission settings so that you, the person who receives the invite can only sort of interact with that prototype. So that's something I try to do for privacy reasons as well.
Gotcha. Awesome. Okay, last question. I know we can talk about this all day. I definitely could. So how do you manage different user groups who have different goals and pain points when it comes to usability testing? Chino, you want to take that one away?
Yeah, I think that's actually part of the testing plan, like the research plan when you're deciding it's a good topic to get into with recruiting. Like, are we talking to our most seasoned customers that have a lot of familiarity on your platform? Or are we talking to new customers or customers that don't even use our product yet? So I think just as far as like identifying groups, I think when we're talking strictly about usability, that's obviously the knife we cut and slice with.
Right.
Then, you know, it's going to depend on your business use case as well, like the different verticals that your company is trying to target, et cetera, and like dividing our customers that way is another way that we tend to look at recruiting and segmenting our customers. Yeah,
for sure. I feel like it always comes back to like your questions and then who you targeted for those. And that's why it's just so critical to really think deeply about who you're really targeting and making sure you're talking to the right people. And if you're not, that's okay, but pivoting is kind of what you would need to do. Awesome. I think, I think that's all for the Q&A. Joey is now back on screen, so I'll hand it over to him.
Krista, thank you so much for moderating that. To all of our hosts, thank you so much for sharing all of that. That was an awesome hour. Definitely learned a lot as a product designer, and thank you to the chat and everyone who joined for all of the questions as well. So great to see so many of you again. Thank you so much for spending the hour with us today, depending on where you're at, in the morning, evening, late at night. Really appreciate it. We're doing these often, and as I want to mention, as always, we're always taking suggestions, so feel free to tweet them at us if there's more content or topics that you'd like to see. You can also join us next week as our VP of Product, Yuki, is going to be joining, and then figma.com/events for more to see everything else. And just want to say, most of all, stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you again for everyone's time today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chino, you and Nikki.